It's raining as Yashik and Yuri arrive at the apartment building where they are going to live since their father has been hired as the building manager. While their father goes to get the keys, Yuri notices a homeless man rummaging through the trash. Feeling pity for him, he shares his sandwich with the man. Meanwhile, Yashek meets a young woman named Cleo, who informs him that the heating in the building isn't working and tells him where to find the keys to all the doors. The homeless man gives Yuri a strange stone, promising that he'll soon discover its purpose. The father and son enter their new apartment. Yashek places a broken photo frame of their former family on the windowsill, and the two begin to have dinner. Their father notices that the plumbing isn't working either. Afterward, Yuri goes to his room, feeling uncomfortable and cold. In the morning, their father sets out to repair the heating system, while Yuri spots 3 boys outside the building. Later, he notices that items in the apartment are covered in some strange black liquid. At the same time, Yashik visits Cleo's apartment, discovering she has a newborn baby. While he examines the heating system, Cleo's husband, Sherby, wakes up in the next room and immediately reaches for a bundle of hallucinogenic substances, which sends him into a daze. Yashek realizes that the pipes are clogged with a black, tar-like substance. Sherby takes the baby while Yashek promises to sort out the system. Cleo leaves for work, assuring Sherby that they'll soon move out of the building. Meanwhile, Yuri takes out the trash and explores the gloomy building. Unexpectedly, the boys from earlier grab him, demanding duplicates of the building manager's keys while their father is busy inspecting his workshop. Sherby, realizing they've run out of baby formula, tries to borrow money from a neighbor. The neighbor invites him to return later, but Sherby needs the formula urgently and attempts to steal a pack from the local store. Lone, the shopkeeper's daughter, catches him and stops the theft. Yashik opens the doors to the basement, surprised to find its walls and machinery covered in the same black, viscous substance, which is preventing the boilers from functioning properly. Meanwhile, Sherby visits the neighbor, where several residents of the building are gathered. A woman with a baby offers to breastfeed Sherby's child in exchange for a package of the same black substance. Yashik opens another pipe, and the black liquid pours out again. Sherby admits they haven't named their baby yet. The neighbors pass the baby around, admiring him and pooling together gifts for the new tenant. Yashek discovers that there's a stove in the apartment above, and he rushes there with a fire extinguisher. It turns out to be the apartment where the neighbors have gathered. Yashek puts out the stove and disperses the potentially hazardous group. Later, he praises Yuri for cleaning up the kitchen and notices a cleaning agent, which he takes to the workshop to test on the black liquid. The substance smokes and evaporates with a strange sound resembling human sighs. Yashek finds several canisters of vinegar in a cupboard. Meanwhile, Sherby carries his child home, promising that tomorrow everything will change. They'll move out, christen the baby, give him a beautiful name, and become a picture-perfect family. Suddenly, he feels drawn to the garbage chute, where he throws the money the neighbors gave him down the shaft. At the same time, Yuri ends up near the garbage chute and witnesses Sherby exchanging a small package of the black substance. Yashek begins cleaning the boiler room components with vinegar, which the black substance seems to react to with resistance. The house itself seems to respond. Yuri is thrown back from the chute, fleeing and bumping into a boy. Yashek struggles with the misbehaving valves, while the boy leads Yuri to a dingy lounge with an old freezer chest. The boy, Dennis, pulls out an ice cream, explaining he's been following Yuri because he's bored. His mother often comes home late. Meanwhile, Cleo leaves a message on her husband's answering machine, saying she's delayed at work and that tomorrow they'll go see a new apartment. However, the phone mysteriously erases her message, leaving Sherby unaware of it. Sherby suffers from auditory hallucinations as the baby cries again. He frantically runs around the apartment before grabbing the baby and heading to the corridor, once again finding himself near the garbage chute. Sometime later, he regains consciousness on the floor near the open chute, but realizes the baby is no longer in his arms. From the depths of the building, he hears the baby's cries. At that moment, the boiler starts working and hot water flows through the building's pipes. Yuri is awakened by a knock at the door. It's Sherby, begging for help to find his missing child. The two head to the basement, but the baby isn't in the trash container. However, his cries can clearly be heard from the garbage chute. Rescue workers are called and descend into the pipe, but they come up empty-handed. Meanwhile, Cleo remembers the meeting, but finds no messages on the answering machine. She assumes Sherby must have started using again. How else could he lose their baby? Sherby denies the accusation, claiming he's clean. After the police leave, Yashek returns to Yuri with a blueprint of the building. Yuri admits to hearing the baby's cries in the chute, but his father reminds him that it was already inspected. At the same time, Cleo and Sherby begin searching apartments. When one neighbor opens their door, their fighting dog escapes. Yashek spots the dog and chases after it, only to find a black stain on the wall instead. Cleo hears the sound of a baby crying behind a neighbor's door, but the woman who breastfed the baby earlier emerges, revealing Sherby's lie. Though Sherby swears he hasn't used and even shows her the unopened packet of the substance, Cleo storms off. Jacek continues chasing the dog, but ends up meeting Zettel, the owner of a cat, who invites him into his home. Meanwhile, Yuri meets Lone, who isn't rushing home after school, but heading to the apartment of an older neighbor. Yuri hears the baby's cries again and decides to study the building's blueprint. Zettel introduces Jacek to his large family. Yuri, in the meantime, finds Dennis in the lounge and convinces him to help search for the missing child. He points out that the lounge isn't marked on the blueprint, meaning there could be other unmarked spaces in the building. Sherby tries to return the packet of the substance to the three boys, but they refuse to give him back the money. The sophisticated neighbor is playing Bach's Fugue for Lone, admiring its beauty while embracing her. Then he instructs her to undress. Dennis brings Yuri to his apartment but asks him not to wake his mother. He takes a glass and uses it to listen to the walls, demonstrating a strange echo. Yuri listens as well, marveling at the building's odd acoustics. They soon come across a newly installed barrier, and Yuri, asking Dennis to stay put, runs to his father to borrow his set of keys. He heads to Lone to make duplicates. Later, Yuri opens the barrier despite Dennis's fears and pleads to stay away. Hearing the cries of the baby, Yuri is determined to press on. Sherby and Cleo also hear the baby's voice and, along with Jacek, head toward the garbage chute, only to find the building manager's keys missing. Yuri and Dennis approach the source of the crying. Along the way, Dennis disappears, but Yuri notices a large black mold stain on the wall. As he touches it, the mold seems to part under his hand. While Yuri blindly explores the wall's interior, Dennis whispers an apology to someone unseen. Jacek, Cleo, and Sherby manage to enter the chute, where they spot a woman in white holding a baby. Cleo pleads for her son, but it turns out to be the deranged homeless man wearing a dress and cradling a doll. Meanwhile, Yuri realizes his hand is stuck, as if the wall itself is holding him. He calls for help and sees the snarling face of the escaped dog nearby. Panicking, he pulls with all his might and finally breaks free. Dennis hears a voice from the ventilation system, calling him a beloved son and urging him to come closer. When he touches the vent, it becomes red hot, and Dennis screams in pain. Yuri rushes to his father, convinced he knows where the baby is. However, when they return to the spot, the hole in the wall is gone. Jacek breaks through, only to find an empty maintenance room. He assumes Yuri is hallucinating due to the trauma of losing his mother and offers to talk about it. Their conversation is interrupted by a knock at the door. Cleo asks if she can stay with them for a while. Deep within the building, a small hand momentarily emerges from a tangled web of walls, only to vanish again. Meanwhile, Zettel organizes a hunt for the escaped dog, which is rescued by a trio of boys led by Ninja. In the basement, the homeless man collects the black liquid into bottles, preparing it into the hallucinogenic powder. That night, Yuri dreams of his mother and remembers the strange stone he left under his bed. When he goes to the kitchen, he finds Cleo making breakfast. Later, Cleo returns to her apartment to pack her belongings, not wanting to face her husband, who lost their son. Yuri, meanwhile, goes to the garbage chute and tries to throw away the stone, but it heats up in his hand, refusing to let him discard it. He enters the elevator, where he's joined by the trio of boys and their dog. When he exits, he notices the elevator stopping at the 6th floor, a level where the elevator has supposedly been out of order for years. That same day, Dennis suddenly asks Yuri if Cleo might become his new mom. The question irritates Yuri, who decides to search for the missing child again, but Dennis convinces him to help open a room where a cat has been locked up for a long time. Yuri frees the animal, noticing gnawed bones inside. Later, Yuri takes the elevator to the 6th floor. Stopping it midway, he opens a hatch in the wall, discovering a passage to a room filled with barrels of black liquid and neatly packed bags of powder. On the wall, he sees the same symbol as on his stone. Just as he's about to leave, the three boys and their dog squeeze through the hatch. Meanwhile, Jacek contacts the insurance company handling the claim for his burned-down house. The boys prepare to force Yuri to drink alcohol, but he reminds them about the keys they need and asks them to teach him how to distribute the powder in exchange. At the same time, Sherby goes to the garbage chute and pours baby formula into it, singing a lullaby to his lost son. The boys explain the system. A buyer taps on the chute wall, receives a response, and then drops money down the shaft, which is caught by someone below. Afterward, the package is dropped from above, and the buyer catches it, all discreetly. However, Ninja warns Yuri never to try the powder, as it completely erases a person's identity. Meanwhile, a neighbor catches Sherby in the act. When he collapses, she drags him into her apartment. Later, Yuri encounters Dennis again, who asks what to feed a cat that refuses all food. Yuri suggests finding something the cat likes and promises to check in tomorrow. Returning home, he sees Cleo still there and confronts her, blaming her for her baby ending up in the trash chute. Dennis, remembering the cat's time locked in a room filled with bones, realizes what it eats. He tracks down Zettel's cat. The next morning, Zettel's entire family searches the building for the missing animal, but comes up empty-handed. An insurance agent visits Jacek. Meanwhile, Yuri notices that the dog's owner has recaptured it and follows him, as the stone in Yuri's hand begins to glow, signaling something. Yuri sneaks into the man's apartment, which is filled with cages of snakes. The agent shows Jacek remnants of a fire suppression system, explaining it should have triggered during the fire, meaning the blaze and his wife's death was no accident. Yuri attempts to free the dog, but is caught by its owner, who picks up a taser. The house reacts violently. Lights flicker and the walls shake. The dog breaks free and attacks its owner, while Yuri holds the glowing stone. Nearby, a metal cabinet falls next to the agent, hinting at the potential consequences of his blackmail attempt. The dog follows Yuri obediently, and Jacek advises the agent to write a proper report, sending him fleeing. Yuri delivers the dog to Ninja, who gives him a knife in return. The agent, trying to find an exit, ends up in the basement filled with black liquid. Yuri, upset by Cleo's continued presence, runs away from home. The agent encounters the homeless man in the basement. When he asks for help, the man watches as the agent sinks into the black sludge, laughing maniacally. Yuri asks Dennis to let him stay overnight at his apartment, but Dennis refuses, explaining that the kitten was caged from birth, so he knows what it was fed. Yuri leaves while Dennis returns to the kitchen, where his cat is finishing off Zettel's pet. Suddenly, Dennis hears a voice telling him that his mother will never return because she abandoned him. The oven door opens and Dennis climbs inside, reassured that only it will never leave him. In the morning, Ninja finds Yuri in their secret room behind the elevator. He confesses that he often dreams about the strange figure he drew on the wall, unsure of what it represents. That day, an elderly neighbor calls Jacek to the 10th floor, complaining of a horrible stench. She explains that her persistent cough has kept her from entering the area for a long time. Jacek opens an apartment door and finds a mummified corpse of a woman in the bedroom. The elderly neighbor mentions that the deceased had a son who disappeared years ago. Meanwhile, Ninja goes to the basement and buys another batch of black liquid and powder from the homeless man. The old woman struggles to recall the name of the missing boy while Jacek and his assistants remove the bed, wrapped with the remains, and transport it out of the building. Yuri spends the day helping the trio package the black substance. The coughing neighbor decides she should finally visit a doctor. Lone, on the other hand, observes her father storing his earnings in a safe, unable to understand why he is hoarding money. At the same time, Ninja's helpers are upset that Yuri is being paid the same amount as them, even though he's only packaging the substance. Ninja quickly shuts down their complaints. In Dennis's apartment, the homeless man reappears through the oven. Noticing that someone has been there, he places a photograph of Dennis's mother back on the table. That evening, Jacek finds Yuri with Ninja and asks him to come home. Yuri refuses, saying he won't return as long as Cleo is staying there. Lone proposes to the sophisticate that they rob her father and travel the world together. He dismisses the idea, telling her to focus on chess instead. Later, Jacek unexpectedly gets stuck in the elevator. He tries to open the hatch above him, but falls and loses consciousness. At the same time, the homeless man approaches a strange formation in the basement wall. The image matches the one on Yuri's stone and Ninja's dreams. When he plunges his hands into it, a red glow spreads, visible even from space. That evening, Ninja offers Yuri a place to stay, claiming that they are alike in many ways. Meanwhile, Jacek, still unconscious in the elevator, hears the voice of his deceased wife. During the night, Ninja wakes from another nightmare and steps into the corridor, where his friends are waiting. They don't want to fight with Yuri or his father. However, Ninja quickly asserts his dominance and silences them. At the same time, Cleo visits a fortune teller living in the building, hoping she can help her find her son. The fortune teller begins a ritual, and Cleo suddenly sees her baby, now grown. Ninja takes Yuri to his alcoholic, incoherent father and recounts how the man used to abuse him, beating and humiliating him, until Ninja finally fought back. Ninja whispers something into his father's ear, reducing the man to trembling fear as he wets himself. The fortune teller assures Cleo that her son will return if she trusts her instincts. Overjoyed, Cleo heads home. Witnessing all this, Yuri decides he can't stay with Ninja and his crew, saying his father is nothing like Ninja's. He returns the knife Ninja gave him and walks away. Upon discovering that his father isn't home, Yuri panics and begins searching for him. He finds Jacek unconscious in the elevator, who asks Yuri to disable the generator 2 floors above. When Yuri peers into the elevator shaft, Ninja suddenly appears behind him and pushes him down. Yuri wakes up in the hospital. After falling 2 floors, he landed on the elevator roof, and his father managed to stop the cabin just in time. Later, Yashek learns about the disappearance of the insurance agent, without whose report he cannot claim the payout. Returning to his office, he finds Cleo, who has brought a newspaper with a job listing, believing he deserves better. However, Yashek disagrees. Meanwhile, the elderly neighbor is horrified to see black liquid oozing out of her body. At the same time, the woman who dragged Sherby into her apartment now mimics his behavior, pouring milk into the garbage chute and singing lullabies to the lost boy. That night, the stone under Yuri's bed heats up and melts, dripping through the floor. The next day, Yashek visits Yuri in the hospital and brings him art supplies. Yuri confesses that something evil pushed him down the shaft, but Yashek refuses to listen. That same day, Lone steals money from her father, and the coughing, elderly woman goes to the hospital. While sketching, Yuri hears a weak voice from a neighboring bed. The woman asks about his accident and expresses surprise at the number of misfortunes in their building. She herself was a victim of the fire. That evening, Yashek agrees to go to the job interview, and Cleo helps him practice answering potential questions. As they delve into personal topics, sparks fly and they grow closer. However, Yashek suddenly sees a vision of his late wife, causing Cleo to flee. Meanwhile, Lone visits the sophisticate, who turns her away, having found a new protege, Zettel's daughter. The elderly neighbor visits Yuri in the hospital and is shocked to see a drawing of Dennis. She recognizes him as the boy who disappeared 30 years ago, someone Yuri couldn't possibly know. She regrets not helping the lonely boy, but Yuri insists he saw and spoke with him. The next morning, Yashek prepares for his interview while Cleo cooks lunch. When Yashek steps outside, he finds his car missing its engine. As Cleo washes a chicken, bloody water flows into the building's drainage system. Yashek walks to the interview location, but as he waits, he feels the black liquid pulling at his legs, making it impossible to move. He retreats to the restroom. Back at the apartment, Cleo answers a ringing phone and hears her baby crying. Black milk begins to seep from her chest, and she screams in terror, seeing tiny hands inside the burning stove. Yashek loses consciousness and finds himself in his workshop. Meanwhile, it's revealed that Sherby is chained in the apartment of the woman who took him. That evening, Lone's father reassures her that losing the money isn't the end of the world. Overcome with guilt, Lone admits to stealing the money and returns the full amount, begging for forgiveness. Her father, however, refuses to listen. Later, Cleo encourages Yashek not to lose hope, telling him about the fortune teller who helped her believe in a brighter future. Yashek, however, lists all the calamities that have befallen them in the building. Cleo runs away in frustration. At the hospital, the burned woman sees one of Yuri's drawings, and he opens up about his mother, suggesting that she might have wanted to end her life. To his surprise, the woman confirms his suspicions. As Yuri drifts to sleep, he calls her Mom. Cleo returns home and, not finding Sherby, consumes some of the black powder. Lone weeps as her father leaves her alone in the cursed building. During the night, Yuri's medicine is contaminated with blackness, attempting to invade his body. However, the burned woman places a hand on his shoulder and the darkness retreats, allowing Yuri's body to heal. He wakes up feeling much better, but no one knows anything about a burned woman. Yashek receives a call from the municipal office, praising him as the best manager they've had in years and expressing their gratitude for his work. However, the phone lines are connected to the building's very structure. Later, Yuri decides to leave the hospital on his own. That day, Yashek repairs the building's surveillance system and is shocked to see his late wife Anya entering his office on the screen. Meanwhile, Cleo breastfeeds one of the neighbors in exchange for money. In the hallway, Yuri meets Lone, who asks if she can accompany him. Cleo, hearing a lullaby, notices a neighbor pouring milk into the garbage chute and secretly follows her to her apartment. As she does, black milk begins to seep from her own chest. Yuri and Lone head to Dennis's apartment. However, Yashek, watching them through the cameras, orders Yuri to come to his office. Instead, Yuri detours to the lounge and discovers wallpaper-covered doors. Peeling them away, he finds a locked door with a key nearby. Inside, they find a display with information about the tenants. The central photo is missing. Yuri shows Lone the freezer chest from which Dennis once took ice cream. He opens it and finds strange remnants, including a charred photograph of the residence. As he reaches for the photo, he suddenly falls into the chest. The lid slams shut and Lone struggles to open it. Inside, black sludge begins to engulf Yuri and he loses hope of escape. At the last moment, Lone manages to lift the lid and pull him out, the photo still clutched in his hand. Yuri places it on the display before they leave. Back home, Yashek continues to see Anya. Meanwhile, the sophisticate begins teaching Zettel's daughter chess. When she tries to leave, he pours her a glass of wine and starts talking about the true closeness of body and soul. Yashek brings Yuri to his office, teaching him how to operate the surveillance system. He insists on restoring order to the building and wants Yuri's help. Later, they and Lone run into the elderly neighbor who recognizes the photo from the day of Dennis's birthday. However, she remembers little else. Yuri suggests hosting a reunion for the building's older residents. Lone distracts Jacek, lying about losing a key, while the elderly neighbor posts an announcement for the gathering in the lounge. Meanwhile, Cleo waits for the kidnapper to leave and approach the garbage chute to feed it. She breaks into the apartment and finds Sherby. As she tries to free him, the woman returns and strikes her on the head. In the lounge, elderly tenants begin gathering. Cleo regains consciousness, and Sherby slowly comes to as well, though the woman refuses to release him. Cleo returns to her own apartment. At the gathering, Yuri asks the residents to recall Dennis. They share that he was born in the elevator while his mother was returning from the store, which is when the photo was taken. He was the building's first child. Meanwhile, Sherby demands to be freed. Zettel and his sons storm into the Sophisticate's apartment, having learned about his harassment of their daughter. As the gathering continues, the residents remember how Dennis's mother often left him alone for long periods. One day, he disappeared, leaving behind a mutilated cat. They regret not helping him and express their guilt. Suddenly, Zettel and his family burst into the lounge, dragging the beaten Sophisticate. The group found indecent photos of Lone in his apartment and now demands justice. Zettel suggests castrating the Sophisticate, but Jacek arrives, putting an end to the mob's plans. He disperses the crowd, and they reluctantly comply. That night, Sherby finally returns home. That night, Jacek sees Anya again, who urges him not to make the same mistakes with their son. The next morning, the entire building wakes from a nightmare, witnessing the emergence of a strange, terrifying entity. Yuri also sees the gaping void and realizes that something in the building is watching everyone, draining their happiness and feeding on their emotions, growing stronger with the spread of black mold and sludge. Yuri walks through the building, sensing the presence of the homeless man behind him, but finds no one when he turns around. He reaches the hole Jacek made in the wall and suddenly sees the dog's owner, who demands his face back. Terrified, Yuri runs home and tries to talk to his father about the blackness that is corrupting everyone, himself included. Jacek, behaving oddly, dismisses Yuri's concerns as ghost stories. Yet Jacek himself sees ghosts. He speaks with Anya, vowing to protect their son. Meanwhile, Lone sneaks into the wrecked apartment of the Sophisticate. Among piles of indecent photographs, she finds the man, beaten and hanging from a noose. Yuri leaves the apartment, while Anya's ghost insists that Jacek deal with his son's troubles. Searching Yuri's desk, Jacek finds disturbing drawings of strange creatures in their home. Yuri finds a crying Lone and takes her to his father's workshop, where he pulls out canisters of solvent. He plans to burn Ninja's secret room. Together, they douse everything inside. Ninja arrives, and Yuri explains that the entity in the house is making everyone miserable. Ninja admits he knows. Suddenly, Yuri pulls out a lighter and sets the powder-packed room ablaze. Seeing the same nightmare image on the wall, Lone confesses she has also seen it in her dreams. The two flee as the room erupts in flames. The entity below immediately reacts to the fire, roaring and expanding. At the same time, Sherby goes to the garbage chute and knocks, but there's no response. The building groans, releasing more black sludge as its sounds grow louder. Meanwhile, Zettel and his newly formed cleaners start hunting down those who break moral codes. Sherby hides, but they bang on his door. He tells Cleo there will be no more powder, but she suddenly hears her baby crying, though Sherby hears nothing. Yuri visits the mutilated dog owner, offering to help. The man asks him to apply an ointment to his face, which Yuri does. The man reveals that during the attack, it felt like something else was controlling him and the dog. Suddenly, he points to the wall and says, "It's here!" before screaming, "It won't have me!" and stabbing himself with a knife. Sherby, meanwhile, opens the ventilation shaft where Cleo hears her son's cries. Though nothing is inside, the crying grows louder. Yuri rushes home, but Jacek locks him in his room. Anya's ghost pleads with Jacek not to harm their son. In the basement, the homeless man speaks with the entity, calling it Mom. The creature demands that the boy disappear, and the man promises to handle it. Yuri wakes to hear his father explaining to someone that his son is obsessed with the building, just as his mother was. He admits he is terrified because of what happened to her. That evening, Jacek releases Yuri and introduces him to someone he claims will help. As the man leads Yuri away, he transforms into the homeless man. Jacek suddenly realizes something is wrong and starts chasing after them. The homeless man takes Yuri to the roof, urging him to take a final step and end it all, saying everyone will forget everything afterward. Yuri calls him by name, Dennis, and Dennis freezes. Yuri explains that the residents remember him, but Dennis refuses to believe it. He reveals that something incredible lives within the walls of the building. She was always there for him, the only one who cared, but she won't love him as long as Yuri is alive. Meanwhile, Jacek searches for his son on the surveillance cameras, but instead sees visions of Anya dousing herself in flammable liquid and setting herself on fire. Trembling, Jacek collapses by the monitors. On the roof, Dennis prepares to push Yuri off the edge, but Ninja arrives and tries to defend Yuri. Dennis uses telekinesis to fling Ninja away, breaking his arms. Yuri grabs Dennis's toy car and dangles it over the edge. Dennis demands it back, and when Yuri refuses, Dennis uses his powers to force Yuri to hand it over. In the split second he's distracted, Ninja lunges forward and shoves Dennis off the roof. As Dennis falls, Jacek regains consciousness. Supporters of the black powder, sensing its disappearance, immediately step out into the hallways, where they encounter the cleaners, determined to rid their loved ones' lives of this filth. Jacek urges the residents to remain in their apartments, but not everyone listens. Meanwhile, Cleo once again hears a child's cries coming from the ventilation shaft. Zettel gathers his followers, urging them to cleanse the building entirely, down to its foundations. Yuri, Lone, and Ninja head to Dennis's apartment to figure out how to reach the very epicenter. Suddenly, Yuri begins to see a burning oven from which black streams pour, though the others remain oblivious. Realizing they've walked into a trap, Yuri loses consciousness, hearing his mother's voice before seemingly sinking into the depths of the house, where he comes face to face with the creature. It feels as if he's transported back in time to the day Dennis gave him the stone. The creature's voice beckons him, and he once again sees his mother. The creature marvels at Yuri's ability to see more than others and calls him to join it. Yuri regains consciousness and tells his friends he knows where the creature is, unaware that his words are reaching Jacek through the ventilation shaft. At that moment, the oven door bursts open and a stream of fire floods the kitchen. The trio flees. The building shakes, lights flicker, and elevators grind to a halt, preventing the residents from escaping. Jacek appeals to the people, forbidding them to leave the building, but many no longer listen, terrified by the streams of black ooze. As he makes his rounds, Jacek sees the cleaners beating the powder distributors. Unexpectedly, he approves of their actions this time and asks Zettel to help ensure no guilty party escapes the building. The residents argue, but the cleaners prevail. A voice over the intercom promises a swift evacuation just as Zettel's helpers surround the trio. Jacek orders everyone to gather in the recreation room. Despite their doubts, the residents comply. Sherby finds Cleo near an open-air vent. The building shakes as if ready to collapse. Unexpectedly, Cleo suggests giving their child a name and proposes calling him Tony. Jacek plays music over the intercom, bidding farewell to the residents. Zettel's people herd everyone into the recreation room, while Yuri is led to his father. The man apologizes, explaining he only wanted to restore order, but Yuri drove away the creature, which sought balance and peace. It had been there too long and lacked the resources to simply leave, so it would now consume all the energy it could gather. The freezer opens, releasing black sludge that terrifies the residents. The building trembles, furniture topples, and Yuri begs his father to stop it. Jacek suddenly confesses that, since his wife's death, his world has been shrinking, and death, after all, is a new beginning. Meanwhile, the residents struggle desperately to survive. Yuri suddenly shouts that his mother's death wasn't an accident. She wanted to die. Jacek couldn't stop her. These words seem to awaken him. Jacek admits he waited for her death because he was tired of battling with a mentally ill woman. He cries, finally letting go of his wife, and regains his composure. Jacek rushes to the recreation room. When Zettel prevents him from opening it, he takes Zettel hostage. The door opens and the people pour into the hallway. Yuri climbs into the oven in Dennis's apartment. Cleo hears her son's voice and pulls him out of the ventilation shaft. She and Sherby cry with joy and flee the apartment, while Jacek leads everyone else out through the garbage chute. Yuri finds himself facing the creature, which calls him home and then reveals its true form. The residents emerge into the courtyard as the recreation room bursts into flames. Yuri reaches out and dives into the black void, finding himself in the depths of space. In this series, the building itself becomes an autonomous and almost central character, devouring children and insurance agents, spawning ghosts, and holding all its residents tightly in its grasp. Yet it ultimately surrenders when confronted by someone unwilling to accept the status quo.